Vande Gujarat.
Hi, my name is Nisha Mehta and I'm the Functional English Trainer with Scope. Today we are going to talk about English Speaking Module 5, the Linguaskill Module 5. I welcome you aboard. Let's see what we have for today in the module. This is the last module in the speaking task. Now, just before we start with the module, if you have not watched the previous videos or the previous modules, a small introduction about what Linguaskill examination is all about. Linguaskill examination is basically a computer adaptive test that can be taken by the candidates anywhere around the world. ये टेस्ट कहीं से भी लिया जा सकता है. Candidates इस टेस्ट को proficiency in English language वो अपनी proficiency जानने के लिए लेते हैं. It tests the proficiency of the candidate in English language, and also just to make sure that they are proficient in speaking, the computer assesses them in 4 aspects of the language, which is reading, writing, speaking, and listening. In this speaking module, we saw that the speaking has 5 tasks in which the candidate will be assessed. 5 tasks involved the introduction, where the candidate will be asked 8 questions, out of which the 2 questions are not marked. So the candidate can get comfortable with the speaking or answering the next set of questions. He or she gets the speaking time as 10 seconds to answer each question. So सभी candidates को 10 सेकेंड दिए जाते हैं फर्स्ट टास्क को आंसर करने के लिए. There are 5 tasks in the speaking part. The second task was to read aloud. Reading aloud means the candidate was actually shown some of the sentences on the computer screen, and वो questions या वो sentences candidates पढ़कर अपनी proficiency दिखाते हैं. Again, the timer is only for 10 seconds. The third task was to speak on a given topic. Again, the fourth task was to speak on the given visual. Both the topics, the candidate has to speak for at least 1 minute. And a preparation time of 1 minute will be given to the candidate. Now, Linguaskill examination, it is divided, or we can say that it consists of 2 options. The candidates have 2 options available. Candidates can appear for Linguaskill Business exam as well as Linguaskill General exam. But in our speaking module or reading module and the other modules, we will only talk about Linguaskill Business. Now, who are all the candidates who take Linguaskill Business examinations? Are people who want to show or display their skills at work, or they want to get recruited to any of the companies, corporates, or organizations. So this particular exam, which is the Linguaskill exam, helps the employers recruit the best possible candidates in the company. Now let's look at what we have for today. So as I said, that it is a computer-based test that can be taken anywhere. Second, it tests the efficiency or proficiency of the candidate in English language in 4 aspects, which is speaking, reading, writing, and listening. The language proficiency is assessed on a CEFR scale. If you're new again to the module, let me share it with you that CEFR scale is the common European framework of reference for languages. So whenever a candidate appears for the examination, he or she is assessed on this scale, where A1 is a beginner level. If you receive a score of say A1, A2, B1, you are at a beginner level or an intermediate level. And if you receive a C2 score on the CEFR scale, you are a proficient user. Now, Linguaskill Business helps the employers As I said, it helps the employers to know that the employee is well versed with the business English, or he is well versed with the words used in business in English. Let's see what do we have next in the module and what do we cover today. Let's talk about the speaking test format for Linguaskill business option. Now again, this has been, I have repeated this a couple of times in the previous modules too. And if you're new to this module, you're watching this module for the first time, let's talk about what is the speaking test format for the Linguaskill business. So for all the candidates, speaking test consists of 5 parts. Part 1, which is the introduction. Introduction, the questions asked in the introduction and speak 1 or part 1, speaking part 1, will be the basic questions related to business, workplace, or your teammates. There will be 8 set of questions under this part. 8 questions कैंडिडेट से पूछे जाते हैं और वो क्वेश्चंस जो होते हैं वो आपके बिजनेस से रिलेटेड होते हैं या वर्क या जॉब प्रोफाइल से रिलेटेड होते हैं एंड कैंडिडेट उसे 10 सेकेंड के टाइम में आंसर करता है. सो द कैंडिडेट इज गिवन 10 seconds टाइम टू कंप्लीट द इंट्रोडक्शन. नाउ लेट्स मूव ऑन टू द सेकेंड पार्ट. Part 2. It was about reading the sentences aloud. Now, reading the sentences aloud, in this part, we discussed that the candidate or the test taker will read a couple of sentences shown to him on the screen, on the computer screen. Again, 10 minutes timer is provided to the candidate. Part 3. Speak for a minute on a given topic. Now, as I said, speak for a minute. The candidate will be given a minute to speak. Candidate को 1 मिनट दिया जाएगा आंसर रखने के लिए एंड 1 मिनट का टाइम या 40 seconds maximum time is provided to prepare and think on the given topic. Part 4. Now this part, again the candidate has to speak for a minute. It is somewhat similar to part 3. Part 3, the candidate speaks for a minute but on the given topic and the prompt. Whereas candidate in part 4 speaks on the topic for a minute, not on the topic exactly, but on the visuals or graphics provided. Part 3 और part 4 में एक छोटा सा अंतर है और वो अंतर सिर्फ और सिर्फ एक टॉपिक और एक ग्राफिक्स का है. Graphics, as I mentioned in the earlier modules, is basically the graphics will be provided ranging from pie charts to diagrams to simple pictures or images in which the candidate will get 1 minute to express the key points in the answer. Now let's look at what is part 5. So that's the last part that we have for Linguaskill business speaking. One of the most difficult among all the other parts that we did. Part 5 is a task-based communication. Now in this part 5, you will see that this is one of the most difficult tasks or parts that the candidate will come across, which is a task-based communication. Now, what is a task-based communication? That is what we are going to learn first and then move on to specific rules and regulations, tips and instructions in the examination or for clearing the examination. Now, when we talk about task-based communication, we saw that in the speaking module, there are ranges of questions that a candidate is asked. However, if we talk about part 5, or task-based communication, उसका मतलब होता है कि आपको एक task दिया जाता है. The candidate is given a task, and based on the task, there are few questions that will be asked randomly to the candidate. Now, initially I mentioned that this particular task or this particular section, the most difficult questions of all the parts. Why? Because the questions asked to you in this part will be random. जो questions इसमें candidate से पूछे जाएंगे वो बहुत ही random होंगे. Candidate को इसका अंदाज़ा नहीं होगा कि questions क्या हैं. Now, how to go about clearing or to ace this round or to ace this task is whenever you're given a task, it is important that you read the task properly. Reading is the key here. Now, if you do not read the task, if you think that, you're going to answer the questions randomly, there is just one difficulty which is a candidate can face, and that is the candidate will have no time to prepare. Once a question is posed to the candidate, एक question candidate से पूछा जाएगा, there is no preparation time. There is no thinking time. Now, जब आपके पास thinking time नहीं होता, preparation time नहीं होता, तो जब आंसर्स आप कहते हैं या आंसर्स आप अपने देते हैं, वो आंसर्स देने में कहीं ना कहीं एक झिझक होती है. There is a hesitation in speaking. Now, how to deal or tackle with such questions? That is what is important. Let's look at how do we deal with specific problems in this area. Let's look at what we have on the screen. Part 5, task-based communication. Before we move on to what are the rules, what are some of the rules and regulations and tips and instructions to ace this part, we are going to see the format of the test. Now, you might have seen that we are actually discussing the formats of the test. We're actually discussing the format of the test in each part separately. Now, there is a reason behind why do we have to discuss the format? Why do we have to discuss certain tips and instructions? And why do we have to discuss what grammar topics a candidate should prepare before he or she appears for the examination? Now, format of the test. It helps the candidate get an idea of what is going to be asked in the examination and how it is going to be asked. The candidate gets 20 seconds for each question. Now, if I say the candidate gets 20 seconds for each question, and if this is the format that the candidate is aware of, the candidate will form the answers accordingly, which he can finish in 20 seconds. However, if you don't know the format of the question, अगर आपको format ही question का नहीं पता, candidate को पता ही नहीं कि examination में किस तरीके से उसे answers देने हैं या कितने समय में देने हैं, that is where he would not be able to give his 100% in the preparation. वो preparation अधूरी रह जाएगी. So it is important that we discuss the format first of the test and then discuss all the grammar topics or maybe the things that you need to prepare for that particular part and some of the general and specific instructions to ace the exam. So let's look at the format of the test for part 5. Most of the formats you will see under the speaking section will be same as the previous module. However, the timings that we have in the format are a little different, keeping in mind the questions or the extended answers. Now, candidates gets 20 seconds for each question. एक candidate को 20 seconds मिलेंगे हर question के लिए. There will be 5 questions in total. 5 question candidate से पूछे जाएंगे and the candidate has to make sure कि वो 5 questions का जवाब, हर question का जवाब वो 20 seconds के timer के अंदर ख़त्म करे. लेकिन घबराने की बात इसमें कैंडिडेट के लिए नहीं है अगर वो आंसर्स पूरे नहीं दे पाते. Although it is important that the candidate must fulfill the criteria of 20 seconds timer. 20 seconds timer, he has to finish the answer. But even if you get cut off in between, it is just fine. You will not be penalized for the same, or there will not be any negative marking. Now, let's move on to the second point, or the second format of the test. 40 seconds of preparation time is given to the candidate before he gives the first answer. Now, just to inform you here, in the earlier sections or in the earlier tasks, in the earlier parts, we saw that for every question, the candidate was given 10 seconds, 20 seconds and 1 minute. to prepare and think. However, this particular task is a little difficult task because the questions are random and you will not get enough time to prepare any answer. Now, what are these 40 seconds for? ये 40 सेकेंड जो आपको दिए जा रहे हैं इस पार्ट के लिए, वो किस लिए हैं और वो कब दिए जाएंगे? Now this 40 seconds timer will be given to the candidate when the candidate is reading the question. जो टास्क आपको दिया जाएगा वो रीड करने के लिए 40 seconds आपको दिए जाएंगे. So in short, 40 seconds आपके पास हैं ये समझने के लिए कि आप questions में क्या करेंगे. What will the candidate do in the question? For that, he has 40 seconds. Now, before he gives the first answer, this 40 seconds timer will be there to think about what he's going to say in the questions. Now, I'm sure most of the people will have this question that, if the questions are random, how can we prepare something before? Questions अगर ऐसे random पूछे जाएंगे, तो पहले से preparation का मतलब हमें timing क्यों दिया है? या हमें ये 40 सेकेंड क्यों दिए जा रहे हैं? Let's talk about what are these 40 seconds for. Now the 40 seconds timer is to answer or think about the answer. What are you going to think about? Let's talk about that first. Now part 5, task based communication. ये जो task based communication है उसमें आपको एक task दी जाती है स्क्रीन पर. When you look at the task, you will see a lot of prompts there. A lot of prompts. Like, if you are given a question, a sample question we're going to do at the end of the module. However, just to explain it to you, एक question अगर आपको दिया जाता है तो उसी question के ऊपर based कुछ prompts या कुछ topic sentences आपको दिए जाएंगे. I again repeat that you will be given a question, the candidate will be given a question on the computer screen, and there will be couple of prompts that will be there. Now, the 40 seconds timer is given to the candidate to make sure that you read all the prompts and you try to put down your bullet points in the prompts. So let's say, for example, we can say, do you like to watch a movie on weekends? Or maybe the question can be about watching movies, right? Or the first question could be, do you like watching movies? Now, instead of just saying a yes or a no, as I mentioned earlier, that in the earlier modules, we said that no question will be answered in just one word. You will not talk about or you will not say one word answers. The same applies to this task too. So whenever you are asked about any questions based on the task, you're not supposed to answer or give answer in one word. Keep that in mind throughout the speaking module. So a task will be given to you, and based on that task, you will be asked few questions. Now, what is the aim of, or what is the reason behind asking questions based on the task? Let me clear that first, and then we can move on to the general instructions tips related with this particular part. So, when you talk about the aim of this section, it says the aim of this section is to assess the ability of the candidate in expressing opinions and ideas. So in the earlier tasks in the same module, हमने देखा था कि पिछले कुछ modules में, in the speaking module, there was a question that was posed or maybe graphics that was shown, and the candidate has to answer looking at the graphics or maybe looking at the task. He had to frame the answer. However, in this part 5, the candidate will read the task. There would just be a question where a task will be given. And then you will see that the candidate will be asked random questions based on the task. So what happens is, when the candidate has to answer or give an answer in 20 seconds, he has to make sure that he's expressing his opinions and ideas in that particular answer. So you don't have to sound realistic, you don't have to sound factual, you don't have to sound that you are correct, you are true, you're providing a true information. No. ये पार्ट आपसे ये नहीं पूछता कि आपको सही इन्फॉर्मेशन देनी है. ये पार्ट आपसे पूछता है कि आप सही तरीके से उस इन्फॉर्मेशन को दे पा रहे हैं या नहीं. Are you able to express your opinions, suggestions and ideas properly in that answer or not. So in this question, you have to make sure that you have to read the prompt which is given on the computer screen, and then go ahead, form the answer in the 40 seconds time, read the prompts, form the answers, or think about the possible questions that could be asked. Now, for example, if at all the task is all about junk food, right? This is just a common thing. So just a common thing to explain to you as to how to go about answering and thinking about an answer or thinking about the questions that will be asked. So if I have to talk about healthy food or junk food or hygiene or whatever it is, that's a particular task. Let's talk about hygiene, or let's talk about the healthy food. Okay, that's a task. So now when we talk about healthy food, it is a task. There will be prompts related to it just below that. And the prompts would say, what is healthy food according to you? Do you actually eat healthy food? Or maybe the prompts might ask you advantages and disadvantages of having a healthy meal. Just the advantages of having a healthy meal. These questions or these prompts will be given just below the task. So the candidate, what he does is, he actually goes about reading the task and possibly knowing what exactly or just guessing or taking an idea as to what will be asked in the questions. So once the candidate prepares according to the prompts, once the candidate starts or prepares himself according to the prompts, he or she will have an idea as to what to answer when random questions are asked. जब कोई random questions आपसे पूछे जाते हैं तो आपके पास एक आइडिया होगा उस prompt के जरिए कि आप उन questions को answer कर सकें. Now, in the 40 seconds timer, you just have to think about the possible answers of the prompts. आपको ये नहीं सोचना कि question क्या पूछा जाएगा. आपको ये सोचना है कि prompts में क्या चीज़ें दी हुई हैं. What are the things that are given in the prompts? क्योंकि वो questions जो आपसे बाद में पूछे जाएंगे, the questions that will be asked to the candidate later on will be based on the prompts. Let's look at what is the next rule in the slide. Now it says the candidate can provide explanation to the answer along with the suggestions and recommendations. Now we said that the aim of this section is to actually express the opinions and ideas. However, the candidate can provide an explanation to the answer along with the suggestions. It's not necessary that the candidate is just providing the information or just providing to the point answers of the questions. अगर आपसे questions पूछे जाते हैं, आप to the point answers देंगे, लेकिन ऐसा ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप to the point answers दें. उन points के लिए आप you can make sure that the points has some suggestions, recommendations और opinions. आपकी अपनी recommendations, opinions और suggestions भी आप उस answers में दे सकते हैं. Now, the next format that we need to follow is the test takers or the candidates are assessed on various parameters such as fluency, pronunciation, and resources. This is, I think, the most common thing that we are going to come across all the 5 parts in speaking, which is the test takers or the candidates will be assessed on certain parameters of the speaking module, which is fluency, pronunciation, and resources. Resources actually states that, what kind of examples or what are some of the supporting statements that you are including in your answers. That's what resources mean. You can actually pick up your examples from history, you can pick up your examples from psychology, you can pick up the examples from science, literature. So, how do you actually support your answer is something that is going to be seen in the task-based communication. Now, communication, as we know, it is always two-sided. Communication जो होती है वो दो-sided होती है, and it is never one person talking to himself. ऐसा कभी नहीं होता कि एक ही इंसान अपने आप से बात कर रहा है और उसे हम communication कहेंगे. No. So communication is always two-sided. So what happens in this part is that the question will be asked to you by the computer and you have to answer the question keeping in mind that your answers are relevant. It may or may not be a factual information, but your fluency, your pronunciations, and the resources and support is maintained in the answers. That was what was there for the format of the test. Now let's move ahead and see what are some of the rules to make the task-based communication easy. ऐसे कौन से rules हैं जो task-based communication को आसान बनाते हैं? Now, as I said earlier, this particular task is the most complex task of the entire speaking module, or it is the most difficult of all the tasks in the module, because we do not know, or the candidate is not aware of the questions that he or she will be asked. The questions will be random. There is no preparation time that is given to the candidate, and hence it is necessary to keep in mind certain points and rules so that you can be, or the candidate can be, helped in clearing the examination. Let's talk about the first rule. The first rule says, give clear responses to each question and try to complete your answers within the time frame. Now, throughout the module, I have repeated myself that you have to make sure the answers are given keeping in mind the time frame. Because if you do not keep the time frame in mind, you might be cut off in between the sentences. You might not be able to complete the sentences, or maybe some of the prompts you are not able to touch on some of the prompts, or not be able to speak on some of the prompts given in the task. Clear responses for every question is a must. Now, clear responses include relevance and clarity. You have to stick to what is being asked. Do not beat around the bush. आप ऐसा कोई जवाब अपना नहीं देंगे क्वेश्चन के लिए जो irrelevant है, जो क्वेश्चन से related नहीं है. So please make sure your responses are clear and to the point. There is clarity in your speaking. There is fluency in your speaking. Let's move ahead and see what we have next as a rule. It is not necessary to give factual information. फैक्चुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन देना ज़रूरी नहीं है, लेकिन आप अपने आंसर्स को ऐसा नहीं है कि आप फैक्चुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं देंगे तो आपके पास आंसर्स नहीं होंगे देने के लिए. इट्स नॉट दैट यू नीड टू हैव फैक्चुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन और फैक्ट्स इन योर आंसर्स. ज़रूरी नहीं है. यू कैन ऑल्सो बिल्ड अप योर आंसर्स. आप अपने आंसर्स को बिल्ड अप कर सकते हैं अपने क्वेश्चंस के अकॉर्डिंगली. यू कैन बिल्ड अप योर आंसर्स अकॉर्डिंग टू व्हाट इज़ बीइंग आस्क्ड. Do not hesitate to even say a lie, because the computer just wants to judge you or assess you on your speaking skills, not on the skills of telling a lie or a truth. Computer का जो assessment है आपको assess करने का या आपको judge करने का, आपको marks देने का, वो आपकी communication के ऊपर है, आपके वार्तालाप के ऊपर है, और किसी झूठ या सच पे कंप्यूटर आपको मार्क नहीं करता. It never marks you on any truth or lie that you state in your answers. So even if you cook up stories, it is just fine. But stick to what is being asked. Keep it relevant. Let's look at the next point we have, or the next rule that we have, and we have to keep in mind, is during the time when you're giving the examination, look at the bullet points very closely. Now look at the bullet points very closely as they give an idea about the question that will be asked. As I said earlier in the module, in the beginning of the module, that this is one of the most difficult tasks. You have to make sure that the 40 seconds timer that you get, that the 40 seconds timer that you receive is to prepare for the exam or prepare for the questions that will be asked. Now, since the questions are very random, you don't know what the questions will be all about, you have to make sure that the 40 seconds, in the 40 seconds timer that you receive for thinking and preparing, read the prompts very carefully. The prompts will give you an idea about the questions. जो prompts आपको दिए जा रहे हैं वो आपको एक आइडिया देंगे क्वेश्चंस का. तो जब क्वेश्चंस का आइडिया आपको लग जाता है, that is when you be fluent with your answers. You be very fluent in your answers. You don't hesitate to frame your sentences. You don't hesitate to talk about your experiences. The communication just flows. So please make sure that whenever you are posed with the 40 seconds time in the examination, you make proper use of those 40 seconds. Also, most of the times, the candidates do not carry a pen and a paper with them. I would request all the candidates, I would request as well as I would suggest or recommend you all to please note down all the bullet points and all the necessary or key points in the paper, or just put down all the points on a piece of paper so that you have an idea as to what you're going to talk about in the questions. Let's look at the next rule that we have. Now, the candidate can give his opinions, make a speculation or evaluation. It says when you prepare the answers, try to go about giving your own opinion. Try to make speculations, which is you can just try to guess, or you have to evaluate. For example, if it is a health-based question and somebody is asking you, do you eat a healthy meal always? Now try to analyze what is being asked. It's not possible for us to eat healthy meals every time, right? So when I answer the question, I would just keep in mind that, okay, I do not eat healthy meal every time, and why or what stops me from doing that is something that I have to analyze and then frame my answer. So for example, if it is a hygiene or a healthy meal task that has been given and the question is, do you eat healthy meals always? I would simply say that, well, it is not always possible to eat a healthy meal. However, most of the times I try to cook my meals and pack my lunch to my work. It's not possible. Now, this was the basic answer that a candidate can say. However, this answer has to be prepared within that 40 seconds that you are given. Prompts are the easiest ways in which you can just create bullet points and talk about all the things that you're going to talk in, or maybe the answers that you're going to give for a particular question. The only way to go about acing this particular exam is to keep in mind all the rules and regulations, general and specific instructions, so that you do not forget to include everything in your speaking, or even if it is writing or the other modules. The next rule is, this task is little challenging because, as we said, there will be no time given to prepare the answers, and the questions can be unpredictable too. Again, it says candidate can give his opinions, make speculations and evaluations. That's what we discussed already. And while giving the answers, the candidates can focus on the sentence structures, vocabulary and pronunciation. Now, as I said, that whenever you're giving a speaking exam, it is mandatory or it is important or significant. Sentence structure and pattern will help you ace the examination and get a higher CEFR score. The multiple sentence structures, or the correct sentence structure, as well as a complex sentence structure. Using a complex sentence structure, grammar structure, or using a complex sentence structure or a pattern will help the examiner or will help the computer know that you are proficient with English as a language. Obviously, the sentences will have vocabulary related to the business or the corporate world. Now, while giving the answers in the task-based communication, the candidate has to keep in mind that the pronunciation and intonation of your answers is on the point. it is appropriate, and your feelings and emotions are conveyed in a proper way. Now, why do we talk about pronunciation so much in all the modules, in the speaking module again and again, is because pronunciation is one thing that will help the candidate to pronounce all the words correctly. Now, once the candidate pronounces the words correctly, जब सारे words सही तरीके से बोले जाएंगे, प्रोनाउंस किए जाएंगे, तो वो वर्ड्स कंप्यूटर जो है easily pick कर सकेगा. So it will be easily picked up by the computer. Now, pronunciation always shows that you are well versed with the language, or you are a proficient user of the language. Hence, just to conclude everything in this in these rules, is the candidate has to make sure he follows the time frame. Second, he doesn't necessarily reveal or give factual information. He can build up the answers according to himself. Second, make sure the 40 seconds timer, again, should be used for thinking and preparing. The questions will not be known. They will always be unpredictable. Hence, the difficulty level of this particular task is high. Last but not the least, the candidate can give his own opinions, his evaluations, speculations. Also, he can use the correct sentence structures, vocabulary, and pronunciations to make sure he gets a higher CEFR score. Let us look at the sample question. Now, in the sample question, we are given a task. This is the same way the candidate is going to get the questions in the examination too. Let's first understand how the sample question will go about and how the sample question will be given to the candidates, what exactly it consists of, and then move on to the sample questions that will be asked based on the task. Alright, let's read the question together. It says, an author is writing a book on how social media has changed the lives of people over a period of time. The author is your friend and wants you to help him share your experiences with him. Now, it is very important, just before I proceed, इससे पहले कि मैं आगे बढ़ूं, एक चीज़ मैं सभी के लिए, सभी कैंडिडेट्स के लिए क्लियर करना चाहूँगी कि जब आप क्वेश्चन पढ़ते हैं, ये बहुत ज़रूरी है दैट यू अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन. अगर क्वेश्चन ही आपको समझ में नहीं आता, तो आप उसका आंसर्स या पॉसिबल क्वेश्चंस नहीं ढूंढ पाएंगे. इफ़ यू डोंट अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन प्रॉपर्ली, you won't be able to find out what exactly the question is asking you. और जो preparation time आपको मिलेगा 40 seconds का, वो 40 seconds का timer भी आप lose कर देंगे. You're going to lose that 40 seconds timer completely. So it is very important that you understand the question. Question में क्या दिया हुआ है, क्या पूछा हुआ है आपसे, आपको ये जानना ज़रूरी है. Then pick up the keyword. Keyword question में से निकालना और उसके ऊपर prompts का आंसर देना is what is required. So for example, let's look at the sample question on the slide and see what it says. Let's understand the question first. इस question में कहा गया है कि एक author है जो एक किताब लिख रहा है, एक लेखक जो एक किताब लिखना चाह रहा है, किसके ऊपर? कि सोशल मीडिया ने किस तरीके से हमारी जिंदगियां बदल दी हैं. How has social media changed the lives of people over a period of time? मतलब एक 21वीं सदी या 20वीं सदी से लेके अभी तक सोशल मीडिया ने हमारी लाइफ्स को कैसे चेंज किया है. That is what is asked in the sample question. Now, क्वेश्चन आगे बढ़ता है और वहाँ पर लिखा हुआ है कि ऑथर या लेखक जो है उनका एक दोस्त है, मान लीजिए आप उनके दोस्त हैं, एंड यू वॉन्ट टू हेल्प हिम शेयर योर एक्सपीरियंसेस विथ हिम. वो चाहते हैं कि आप अपने एक्सपीरियंसेस या अपनी कुछ बातें इसी टॉपिक पर शेयर करें. नाउ सेम क्वेश्चन हैज़ बीन given in the way, in the form of fonts. There are a lot of fonts or there are a lot of prompts that have been given there. Now, what prompts are there? Let's look at all the prompts and see हमें answers किस तरीके से बनाने हैं. It says, the first prompt says, he can ask questions about uses of social media in daily life. आपसे questions पूछे जा सकते हैं कि social media का daily life से क्या ताल्लुक है. Daily life में आप social media को कैसे इस्तेमाल करते हैं. आपसे ये भी पूछा जा सकता है, what are the advantages of social media? You could be asked for the advantages of social media, and you could be asked for the disadvantages of social media too. And the last question says that you could be asked for the impact of social media on people. Now, this is the entire task जो आपको अपने computer screen पर दिखेगा when you appear for the examination. So in this particular task, it is important to make sure that you understood the question completely. And second thing is that you understood what the prompts have actually to convey. Now starts the 40 seconds timer. 40 सेकेंड का टाइमर यहाँ से शुरू होता है जब आपने पूरा क्वेश्चन पढ़ लिया है. सो वो 40 सेकेंड्स का जो टाइमर की हमने बात की थी, वो 40 सेकेंड्स के टाइमर में आप सारे प्रॉम्प्ट्स जो आपके सामने दिखाई दे रहे हैं, which is the 4 prompts that you see on screen. You will think about something about everything. Like for example, you're going to think something about uses of social media in daily life. How do you use social media in daily life? Do you actually use social media every time? Do you think that, yes, you use only for 2 hours? Or are you there on any of the social networking sites like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and stuff like that? Second, it says advantages of social media. So possibly you could be asked questions related to what are the advantages? Or do you think there are any advantages of social media? These can be the possible questions. Now, जब हम इसका अंदाज़ा लगाते हैं कि हमें क्या पूछा जाएगा, वो 40 seconds में हमें bullet points लिखते जाना है. We have to write all the bullet points. Now, the bullet points are going to help you ace the examination. How? अगर मैं first prompt लेती हूँ, which is the uses of social media, or let's just say I'm going to talk about the advantages of social media. Question मुझसे कुछ भी पूछा जाए, मैं prepared रहूँगी कि advantages क्या होते हैं social media के, उसके क्या फ़ायदे हैं. तो अगर मैं फ़ायदे और नुकसान लिख लेती हूँ, if I write the advantages and disadvantages of all the social media, whatever questions I'm asked, I would not be hesitant. Let's say for example, अगर मैंने advantages में just bullet points लिखे, just to say social media helps you connect with the world. Social media helps you build a brand image. So just write the bullet points. Do not write the complete answers because the timer is just for 40 seconds. 40 सेकेंड के टाइमर में आप कंप्लीट सेंटेंसेस नहीं लिख पाएंगे. सो कोशिश कीजिएगा कि आप सिर्फ बुलेट पॉइंट्स लिखें. सो बुलेट पॉइंट्स का मतलब है सिर्फ मेन पॉइंट्स रिलेटेड टू दैट क्वेश्चन. लेट्स टॉक अबाउट if we say advantages of social media, so the bullet points will be growth, connecting to the world, meeting friends, keeping in touch with friends, and growing your business. Now, whenever the questions will be asked to you, let's say, for example, if the computer asks you a question saying, do you think that there are advantages of social media? You have the bullet points prepared. So, in short, what you have to do is, you will try to answer or frame your answer according to the question asked. Do you think that there are any advantages? Yes. Or well, I think there are a couple of disadvantages or advantages of social media. Social media helps you connect to the world. It helps to grow the small businesses. People get to know you on a larger scale. So these are some of the things that you can include in your answers. Hence, it is important that prompts should be made in bullet points. Think about the prompts, think about all the bullet points, or think about all the things that you can include in the answer. Let's move ahead and see what we have next. This was the sample question. We will have the sample questions too that will be asked based on the prompts. Let's look at all the questions, possible questions. So here you have the possible sample questions that can be asked to you based on the task that was given earlier. The first possible question that you could be asked for is, how do you use social media in your real life? Now, can you think of a better answer if you might have prepared or written the bullet points? I'm pretty sure that you would answer this question appropriately and accordingly. Social media किस तरीके से आप यूज करते हैं अपनी real life में? The second possible question would be, according to you, what are the advantages of social media? So what do you think are the advantages of social media according to you? Do you think there are any disadvantages, or do you think there are no disadvantages of social media? Do you think that there are no disadvantages of social media? Or do you think that social media has no disadvantages at all? Again, it is a yes or a no question. But yes or no question has to be backed up or supported with the example. Now, the next possible question will be, how has social media changed your life in the recent years? सोशल मीडिया ने किस तरीके से आपकी लाइफ को चेंज किया है कुछ 5-10 सालों के अंदर, in the recent years. So these are some of the possible questions. We will again go back to the sample question or the task-based question. These are some of the questions that could be asked in the task that you have been given or the candidate has been given on screen. Now, just to remember all the points, you have to make sure that whenever you are given or you're answering the task-based questions, you are focusing more on completing the prompts or answering completely, keeping in mind the prompts. Do not forget to share your own experiences or recommendations or suggestions. Always make sure that whenever you are answering, the fluency and the pronunciations are maintained in your answers. This was a sample question that we did in this part and the task, and some of the sample questions that will be asked based on the sample task-based question. Now, just the last couple of things to include. Think and frame the answer. How are you going to think? How does a candidate think and forms the answer? We'll just quickly go through it. We have already done these couple of things earlier in the earlier modules. But just to recap a little bit, it says the candidate can think about how people can use social media in their daily life. Now, the answers that you're going to give for the previous questions could be the candidate can think about how people use social media in their life. The test taker can make the bullet points of the advantages and disadvantages. Remember that the candidate has to frame the answers accordingly, and it is not necessary to give the factual information. It is simply okay even if you won't give any facts or factual information in your answers. You will not be penalized for it because the candidate is assessed on the skills to speak and not on the information that he's providing. Last but not the least, it says think about how social media impacts people positively as well as negatively. So all the questions that we saw earlier, the candidate can think and frame the answers keeping in mind all these points. Now, just to give you a brief overview of what we did, this was the last and final module of the speaking test. Now, in this module, we saw that there will be a task-based question, and the task-based question should be answered accordingly of whatever is asked in the questions randomly. The 40 seconds timer of preparation should be maintained to ace the examination. And last, make sure your sentence structures, sentence patterns, and transition in the sentences is smooth, fluent, along with well-intonated sentences. That was all from me on the speaking module, and this was the last and the most complicated of all the topics which we had in the speaking module. I'm pretty sure that the candidate by now have an idea as to how they can ace the speaking module in the exam. I hope to see you in the next modules for the Linguaskill business. Thank you.